I'd like to now move on to NATO and other European alliances. Mike Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary of State, for the time that you've taken to come today with your team, and particularly welcome the comments you made in your introduction about transparency towards Parliament and towards the committee. So thank you very much. As the Chairman said, I'd like to ask a couple of questions about NATO. What does NATO first mean to you personally?
It's a recognition that, first of all, and I say this as a Labour Secretary of State, it means, first of all, a sense of pride that it was a Labour Foreign Secretary that was the architect of the NATO alliance when it was first established, and in particular the Article 5 collective defence at the heart of it. So I feel, first of all, that Labour is the party of NATO and has always been part of the NATO. Secondly, I recognise it as the most successful security alliance in the history of the world. It's sustained over nearly 7 decades, and it is stronger now, more unified now, and bigger now than it's ever been before, which is precisely the opposite strategic effect that Putin wanted by invading Ukraine. So we have been strong supporters from opposition and continue to be in government now, for example, to see the Swedes and the Finns accede to the NATO. So 32 nations strong, with challenges that we can now meet together, but the confidence that as individual nations, that should any come under attack, then we won't face those adversaries, we won't face those threats alone.
Thank you. So I guess I take from that answer and some of your previous answers this morning that as we work in collective defence, the contributions of individual nations are what make that defence. You know, we as the UK promise certain capabilities and outcomes to NATO as part of that collective defence, and other countries do that for us in return. That's, of course, what makes us strong. So I wondered if, with your permission, I might just run through a few capabilities and operations that we might have to carry out to contribute to NATO, and just to see where we are on them. So would the UK be able to deploy and sustain a division to NATO's eastern flank?
Let me give you an answer to this, which will be the same answer to I suspect, the checklist of questions that you've got, which were questions that I had in opposition, which were the reason that I made the commitment before the election and have undertaken since to undertake a NATO test, which I've now completed. And that was set to do exactly the job you're now asking in public, but to provide the answers that I can't share in public, but I'm willing, Mr. Chairman, if you wish, on a properly classified basis to members of the committee, to share the results of that NATO test, because it is a concern to me that as the leading European NATO nation, that we're able to make and fulfill our commitments to NATO. So whether it is a field of full division, whether it is any of the other major asks, and over what sort of timescales, we've undertaken that test. I will share that with the committee, but I won't do that in public.
Thank you very much. That's very generous of you. So accepting that you won't divulge the specific yes-no answers to those capabilities, I wonder if I might just run through whether those capabilities will be within your private answers. Thank you.
Sure.
So the UK warfighting division to NATO's eastern flank.
Yes.
How many brigades we could get to a start line in Senelaga in the event of a major escalation?
That's more specific, but you want to mention?
Well, I'll say a couple of things, Mr. Miller. The first thing, well, I'll say three things really. Conscious, the Secretary of State has offered a classified briefing on this. The first point I would make is that if the British Army was asked to fight tonight,
Yes.
it would fight tonight. And I don't think anybody in this room should be under any illusion that if the Russians invaded Eastern Europe tonight, then we would meet them in that fight. That would be the first point I'd make. Secondly, and as we go through the classified briefing, can we sit here and say that 3 UK division carries no operational risk whatsoever? Of course not. There are a range of operational risks and operational strengths associated with that division, and that is exactly what the Strategic Defence Review is addressing. We've spoken at this committee before about a munitions strategy and a munitions plan. We know we need more lethality. We haven't been secret about that. The Secretary of State has talked about stepping up some of those joint enablers that we need to do. So, of course, there are areas that we're addressing through the SDR. But my third point would be critical to responding is ensuring that we can respond and adapt. And the ability to respond and adapt is absolutely lies at the heart of our industrial strategy. And we're seeing this playing out in Ukraine. It's the ability for Ukraine itself and those allies of Ukraine that can respond and provide whatever they need, or in our case, whatever the alliance needs in the case of a major conflagration with Russia, is able to have the industrial strength to respond. And that is why so much of what we're doing is through the SDR, and what we've done up to the SDR is about absolutely embedding a sovereign industrial base and an allied industrial base as well, because the situation changes on the ground, as you well know.
General,
Thank you.
Just 1 second.
Thank you, General. Yeah, no, I'm absolutely certain that if the Russians invaded Eastern Europe, the British Army would be there. I'm a reserve officer, so I would probably be there with them.
We're there now, of course, in Estonia.
We are, but in force.
And,
in force.
We're ready.
if I could, just one gloss. Obviously, the General has talked about close engagement with NATO. As we think through our part in Sakyer's plans in the event of warfighting with Russia, what we contribute where and when would reflect those plans with Sakyer, and it might be on the Eastern Front very quickly, or it may be elsewhere, so that we need a degree of flexibility in our response.
Yeah.
And of course, we commit the largest part of our armed forces across the board to NATO. We commit our independent nuclear deterrent to NATO. We have around 1,000 people in NATO institutions. We have 3 significant NATO centres in the UK, from the Maritime Command to the Innovation Centre to the ARC. So we make a massive contribution to NATO. More is asked of us, as it is of all nations, and I want to ensure that we meet those asks, and those asks are consistent with what we will do to develop our forces and strength in the future.